My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
You are listening to the Smugglers Galaxy podcast, my favorite podcast to listen to on long flights across the galaxy.
This is the way.
We're wanted men.
I have spoken.
Welcome to episode 232 of the Smugglers Galaxy podcast, your favorite Star Wars podcast for smugglers in the galaxy. It's just me, Glen, this week. Jason's off on another grand adventure. I'm going to do something a little different. I don't know how many of you guys have been listening from the beginning. I don't know when you guys started listening. I don't know how much you guys know about me, but I just want to kind of give you guys my Star Wars history, I guess is the way to put it. And why I love Star Wars and where it began with me and where I'm at now and all that fun stuff. So anyway, here we go. It'll be hopefully interesting. I am one of those people that don't believe in notes. So it's just going to be kind of me talking from the heart and talking, just going free form. So it's not going to be pretty. It may be pretty. It may not be pretty. I don't know. But it's just going to be me talking to you guys. So anyway, here we go. As far as I remember, I've been into Star Wars. It's actually one of my earliest memories is waiting outside a movie theater in New Orleans for Jedi. So that's sort of my first memory, and I remember vividly watching Jedi. I was probably 7, 8 years old when that came out, and just amazed that. Actually, the thing about Jedi that stuck out the most with me was the Darth Vader's makeup when they took his helmet off, and how they can make somebody look like that and have him missing an ear and all that stuff. And I at 7, 8 years old, I didn't comprehend makeup and movie magic. I legitimately thought, if you were watching a TV show and it's dark outside, it had to be dark on the TV show, or vice versa. If it was bright outside, it had to be bright on the TV show. I didn't understand that, it wasn't live and it wasn't Memorex, that kind of stuff. The immediate reaction was the Darth Vader reveal without the helmet. Is the most vivid thing I remember about Jedi. But then afterwards, the Ewoks were a big thing with me. That Ewok song that George Lucas ended up taking out of the special edition, so nobody knows. And that was probably, to me, when they did the special edition and took that song out, I was like, what the hell did you guys do to my song? Because it was such a vivid memory in middle school of Star Wars was that Ewok song. I mean, I remember there was a disco version, and you'd go roller skating and you'd hear it on the radio. You'd go roller skating, they'd play it for you to roller skate. You'd hear it on the radio all the time. And, that song was directly tied into my Star Wars, and George Lucas took it out of the special edition. So that was, a little shocking for me when they redid that, took that out of the special editions. As far as toys were, I always had like the Empire Strikes Back toys. They were always with me. Everybody had G.I. Joes. I had Star Wars. And so when I talk to people, I say, Empire was my toys and Jedi was my movie when I was growing up. And for some odd reason, My mom always had this thing. I never really watched the movies that much growing up because, like, if they were on TV, I'd turn it on TV and she's like, oh, you've seen that before. Go find something you haven't seen before. So I wasn't able to really watch the movies that much growing up because for some reason, she was always like, oh, you've seen that before. Find something else. I don't know if it annoyed her or if she just wanted us watching something else. I truthfully don't know. But I guess that's why I never, me go watching the movies a bunch. I never got a chance to do that just because of that. She'd always want us watching something new, but the toys always had the toys. And I've always been a Star Wars fan. I always loved Star Wars growing up. And growing up, when I graduated high school in '93. So it was the dark times during that time. And from middle school till in the mid-90s, Power of the Force 2 came back out. They had those dark times. I just remember always being a Star Wars fan, but never really being able to find stuff and never really understanding why I couldn't find merch. And, going through magazines and seeing, the back of magazines, somebody had a lightsaber for sale you could buy, and it was like $3,000 or something crazy. I also remember the first time I went to Disney World riding Star Tours for the first time. And that was like, oh my God, I'm in Star Wars finally after all these years. And you walk out, and of course, every time you go to Disney World, you are, they exit you through the gift shop. And I've never seen so much Star Wars merch in my life. My family literally had to pull me out of the Star Tours gift shop because I just spent so much time just in awe of all the Star Wars merchandise they had in there. And you could find t-shirts, I don't remember if they had toys, but they had t-shirts and coins and books and just all kinds of awesome Star Wars stuff that you were able to find for the first time in years and be surrounded by something I loved. That point I was in, high school, freshman, or I was sophomore in high school. And, fast forward to Power of the Force 2 came out. And by that time, I actually started really young in making a family. So I had kids when Power of the Force 2 came out. And I remember getting them out at midnight and going buy toys. And just going crazy with that and actually thinking I got, just like everybody else, you get caught in the fact that all these toys are going to be worth so much money. And so you keep a set and you keep a set carded and you open some stuff. And, I had some for my kids and we had a blast. And my goal at that time, I wanted to have a collection case or a room or something. And unfortunately, we just never had the room for it. And, life gets in the way and then they just end up in a tote. And then years later, I remember selling everything for like $150 to this shop in Dawsonville at a flea market. And I was just happy to get that $150 for this stuff. And I took the money and ran. And, then that was sort of the end of my Star Wars time for several years. And then after that, we... you're going through life and you go through a divorce and as you're doing that, you're trying to find yourself. And I just happened to be on a trip to Myrtle Beach with one of my buddies, and somebody had one of the 12-inch Stormtroopers for sale. And he was like, dude, you should buy it. It's $12 or whatever. And so that was sort of the catalyst of me getting back into collecting, and where I'm at now with it, with the podcast and with the Star Wars Club. And then at that time, I just started dating my wife, and I told her about it, and she was just full-fledged. If that's something you want to do and you can afford to do it, go for it. So she was very supportive of me at the time, and I had started answering Craigslist ads, and this was back when Craigslist, you can still find stuff on Craigslist, and I was finding stuff for cheap. And at that time, I would buy a lot and take what I wanted, and then I was able to sell what I didn't and make my money back. And at that time, I it probably took me 6-7 months of doing that, and I'm like, man, I really should be saving these things. And by that time, it was just too late. Prices had started going through the roof, and so I just kept it. I was like, I'm just gonna keep what I wanted to rebuild my collection I had as a kid, and that did not last long. Before I knew it, I basically saved up enough, and we were in a smaller house at the time, and the whole living room was full of Star Wars stuff. We had parents come over to pick up my daughter, and they would just be in awe of all the stuff we had, because I had a couple of cabinets, and then started collecting Christian Wagner art. So I had that up at the time on the walls. So they'd walk in my house and they'd be like, "Oh my God, you like Star Wars?" And I'm like, "You think so?" But anyway, when we moved into this house that we're in now, we had a basement, so I was able to start putting shelving units together and building a bigger collection, which before you knew it, it finally took over the basement and other several rooms in the house. But going back to starting that, at that time, I think it was around 2017, and I had heard about Celebration, and then all of a sudden it's coming to Orlando, which was an 8-hour drive for me. I was like, man, it's finally here, because I had known that it was in Anaheim, and at the time my wife was like, "You're not going to Anaheim for Celebration, but you can go to Orlando." So because my son lives down there and I had a place to stay, and I had made friends with a couple of collectors in the area, and when it took us, what's funny is it took us leaving Atlanta and going 8 hours south to Orlando to kind of start becoming friends and hanging out more and really get to meet each other. And I know that's happened a lot of times. I know Jason talks about that, how there was one of his buddies lived a mile down the road, and he met him in Orlando, and Jason was living in New York. So it does happen with Celebration. And on the way back from Celebration, I texted those guys, and I was like, I want to bring Celebration back to Atlanta. And that was the way that the Georgia Club started. The Georgia Alliance of Star Wars Collectors Club started out of Celebration 17 in Orlando. And we had done the real quick, had done a Facebook group, and I was real surprised. I figured all three of us were kind of figuring out that, give us 6 months, and if we can get a meetup going in about 6 months, we'll be great. It took about 6 weeks, if that. And we were having our first meetup, and thankfully, one of the guys at the time, he owned a bar, and you don't realize how important that was or how fundamental that was, because it was in the middle of downtown Atlanta, and the walls, the barriers of coming into people's homes, that was gone, and people were just hanging out. We had, you were able, since it was a bar, there was booze, there was food, and people would hang out for 3-4 hours and then bring stuff to sell, because they had a little patio out there, and it was fun watching people walk by the patio wondering what the hell's going on in there with all these Star Wars toys. And it has blossomed into something great. I think we're in our 6th or 7th year with the Star Wars Club, and I've made a bunch of really awesome friends through the club and through other Star Wars clubs in the United States, and even people from outside of the United States through Star Wars. And it's been a really awesome thing. And then doing that for a few years, you start listening to podcasts because you're driving around and you're like, man, you want to figure things out, you want to learn stuff about the community, and you start listening to podcasts. And the more you listen to podcasts, the more you're like, man, I can do this. So, it took me about a year to get together. And then, of course, one of those guys that I started the club with, and then another guy were like, well, let's start a podcast. And with those three guys, we started the Smugglers Galaxy podcast, and it lasted, in that iteration, probably 10 episodes. And then I pulled Jason on because the other guys were just getting busy, and I should have been more upfront with Jason about things, because I guess the way I described it, you tell him, he tells the story, and it's almost like, hey, you want to come on? And I didn't say, hey, you want to be a permanent host. I was just like, I thought, hey, he thought I was just coming on for a week, and then when we were done recording, I was like, so you want to do it again next week? And he was like, oh, this is permanent, huh? So, and we've been doing this podcast, I guess 4 or 5 years in this with me and Jason. So that's been really awesome, and watching our friendship grow, and then our wives have become friends because we're hanging out outside of Star Wars because we only live about 20 minutes apart. And it's been a really cool seeing that happen. because of a Star Wars. And, it's really funny. I guess I look back and people are like, why Star Wars? And yes, I grew up with it. And truthfully, it all boils down to the fact that the toys and the collectibles were plentiful for Star Wars at the time. Because I love Back to the Future. I love Bill and Ted. I've got a pretty, man, you guys have heard me talk about my Bill and Ted run, but that's only like 7-8 figures, and once you're done with that 7-8 figures, you're done. Whereas Star Wars is just everywhere. And at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of Back to the Future merchandising. And that's kind of come full circle a little bit, because I do see a lot more Back to the Future stuff now, because that movie's like 40 years old, which is crazy, because Star Wars is going to be 50 years old here in 27. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about a 40 and 50-year-old movie ruling your life. But that's where we are with this. And thankfully, I've got, like I said, I've got a really understanding wife, and I've been fortunate to start early with this stuff, because if I had to start now, there'd be no way through the pandemic and how prices were going through the roof. There'd be no way I'd be able to have what I have, because I was able to, like I said, start off with buying a $200-$300 lot, and then actually it wasn't even that much. I'd buy like a $50 lot, and then I'd keep the couple of figures I wanted, and then was always able to make my money back. And I thought at that time, it's like, let me pay it forward. I have $200 in this lot. I can make my $200 back selling figures for $3 and $5 a piece, and weapons, for a couple of bucks. I had no clue at the time what weapons were really worth. And I really, part of me wishes I would have held on to that stuff. But then part of me is like, well, it helped get me where I'm at today. So that was, kind of a blessing with that. And, paying it forward. And I think it worked out fine for me. But, it is what it is. And I've got an awesome collection because of the way I started. And I'm consider myself very fortunate to have found Star Wars, and found the friends I have, because I've got some of my best friends are through Star Wars, and through the clubs, and just meeting, hanging out at toy shows and meeting people. So that's why, when we suggest that you get with a Star Wars club, a local Star Wars club, and just get out there and start meeting people, it's a lot of fun. We are pretty fortunate in Atlanta to have a pretty good and thriving toy community. Star Wars is unfortunately, I think, kind of taking a back burner towards a lot of the Four Horsemen, Fresh Monkey. There's a lot of new toy companies coming out that have fresh product, and I think they're doing good work. But it's hurting Star Wars as far as collecting goes. But there's still a lot of people that are passionate about Star Wars, and I don't fault those people, because I got caught up in the Mythic Legions thing for a minute myself, because it was just something new, and they had a good, when I went to Toylanta, and they had a good community around them, and you just meet all these people and you get caught up in it, and you're just like, I want to be part of this community, and I want to be part of this new toy line. And it can be, you can go down a rabbit hole really fast with these new toy lines. But I'm looking forward to seeing what they've got at Toylanta this year, to see what new stuff they've got. But I don't know what I'll buy. I don't know what I'll find there as far as that goes. I'm hoping to find some stuff, but I don't think, going to toy shows for me has become more about meeting people than it has been about buying stuff, because you'll spend more time talking to people than you will looking at things when you go to toy shows. And it's like meeting, seeing friends you hadn't seen in a long time, and just talking to them and catching up. So that's what's awesome about this community, but toy community in general in Atlanta, which, I consider myself very fortunate to have seen it kind of grow and over the last 15 years. So definitely find a community, look through Facebook, find a toy line you like, get in with that community and meet people. There'd be some really awesome people you can meet through collecting, and you'll make some lifelong friends and hopefully change your life for the better, because it's been that for me. And where am I right now in my collecting? I'm pretty much just filling holes. I mean, if I go to a show, it's very rare that I find something. I don't want to say it's become stale, but I definitely would like to find a new niche, a new itch to scratch. And it's really at this point, when you have almost everything you want, to find that, unless you get to a point where you're, instead of making several purchases a year, you're making one purchase a year, because you're compiling your money and saving up through the year to make a very expensive one-time purchase. And I don't know. I guess I need to find that one thing, because it's just, I've been real lucky, like I said, to find stuff. My wife is very, I don't know how she finds things, but she just knows where to look for some reason, or is very lucky to where she can find stuff for very inexpensive, or buy a lot that, like I said, that makes it worthwhile. The last piece that I really got that I was really excited for was the Ghost. And I'll talk about this for a second, but I really was excited for the Ghost. I really am excited for the Ghost. I'm so excited to have the TVC HasLab Ghost in my collection, because it's a crown jewel, I think, as far as that goes, because I have it set up when you walk in my room. It's the first thing you see. But the more I get it and the more I play with it, the more I'm like, they could have done so much more with that Ghost if they would have just taken a little bit more time with it. I'm kind of aggravated when I look at it and I see that the underneath of it has no paint deco. There's been no weathering to it. There's not even the little Ghost symbol on the cargo ramp. Not the cargo ramp, but right next to the cargo ramp. And, as far as scale, I think they did a decent job with scaling, but they couldn't, if they would have really scaled it right. I don't know if you guys remember the big Toys R Us in the 90s, the big Toys R Us Falcon, the Ultimate Falcon that was like 6 feet wide. If they were going to scale it right, that's what we would have ended up with. If they were going to do 1-to-1, because that's truthfully, that Millennium Falcon was a 1-to-1 scale using the 3 3/4 figures. So that's what we would have been looking at. I think they did a good job with scaling. It is kind of, when you put, you don't realize, and truthfully, you don't realize how bad the scaling is, quote unquote, until you put people in the cockpit and you put somebody in the nose gunner seat, and you realize that their head in the gunner seat is in the cockpit. But then once you put the cockpit, because that whole cockpit glass comes out, and once you put that back on there, it's not as noticeable. But when you have that cockpit glass off, you're like, that guy in the gunner seat's head's in the cockpit. So it just doesn't feel right. But like I said, if they were going to scale it right, you would have ended up with this piece of, this massive toy that, you can't even play with that toy. You can't zoom it around, because it legitimately is probably 40, 50 pounds. I know it's 50 pounds in the box, so it has to be that when you're holding it, and you can't fly that around. I can't fly that around. My grandkids go to pick that up, and they're like, "This is too heavy." So it legitimately, you sit it on the floor and you let them play with it, or you could play with it.
Ever met a foundation that does it all? Say hi to NARS Light Reflecting Foundation. Makeup meets skincare in a bottle. It evens skin tone, blurs imperfections, and has a natural radiant finish. Plus, it's formulated with skincare ingredients to help strengthen your skin's barrier. With a newly expanded shade range of over 40 radiant shades to choose from and buildable all-day wear. NARS Light Reflecting Foundation. Find your perfect match.
Every cup of Nespresso coffee is an invitation to transform your morning routine into a ritual you can treasure each and every day. Using the Virtuo Pup, a simple touch of the button freshly brews bold aromas and a rich, velvety crema layer for delicious cafe-quality coffee at home. Whether you enjoy your coffee hot or over ice, every sip, every morning is unforgettable. Nothing tastes like Nespresso coffee. Visit Nespresso.com or our app to explore our full range of easy-to-use machines and coffees not found anywhere else.
So I feel they could have done a little bit more with it. They could have taken a little bit more time. I was talking to Richard, my buddy Richard, last night about this. Look him up, Punks for Plastic on Instagram. And all they really had to do, they could have done like a little bit more, put like a little trap door like they did in the original Millennium Falcon, to where you could have put a droid or something in it. It didn't need to be very deep, but only 3-4 inches where you could have put something in it to hide stuff. Done something with the wings. Even if they could have done something with one of the wings, because it's there's not a whole lot of room. There's room in there, but what were you going to do with that? You could have done something to where the canopy, not the canopy, but the top of the wing comes off, and you got a little play area in there. As far as them only putting 2 rooms in there versus 4 of the bedrooms, I understand why they did that, because like I said, scale. They had size. They had only so much they can do with, and they definitely, I think they did okay with that. Because I keep comparing it to like the Micro Galaxy Squadron one, and that one has all 4 rooms, but you're dealing with a lot smaller scale, so you can make a bigger ship, make it right to scale. But as far as the gunner seats and the cockpit, it's the same issue where you're sitting in the cockpit when you're in a gunner seat, and the cargo ramp in the front's not right. It doesn't look to scale, but that's it's a toy. We can't be perfect. But I think the Micro Galaxy Squadron did a little bit better job. I think they weathered that one too much versus not enough on the HasLab version. But I think both ships look great. I'm excited to have both of them in my collection. And it was a ship that I've been waiting 10 years to have. Because there again, I love Rebels. Look up the episode I did on Rebels a while back. And Rebels is just my jam. I love it. I really identify with Sabine because of her her family misunderstanding her, and then she finds these group of friends in this the Ghost crew, and it's sort of how I feel when I'm with all my friends. It's like I love my family. Don't get me wrong, but I've had issues with you got personal issues with your mom, and I've got a stepmom that's been my mom for 30 years. And I don't, me and my mom we're estranged, but that's sort of I feel with, I think that's why or Jason is at least like, that's why you identify with Sabine. So, a little punk rock kid that's misunderstood. That's why I identify with Sabine. And I just love her. She's my favorite, probably my favorite character, It's not probably, she is my favorite character when it comes to Star Wars. And, I got excited last night. I was looking on Yoda News, either Yoda News or Jedi Temple article. Somewhere on Instagram had leaked the some of the Hallmark ornaments, and they're doing a Chopper. And I've been waiting for Chopper for years, because they did a Zeb a long time ago, and they did Sabine last year, but it was the one from Ahsoka, which is the updated version of Sabine, or live version of Sabine, which is an awesome version, but it's not that. I'd love to have an animated version of the Rebels characters again, but they're doing a Chopper. Hallmark is, so I'm pretty excited about that. And then they also leaked that the card back, they were going to do a Luke Skywalker. So those are probably the only 2 ornaments I'm going to buy, unless something else comes up that because they'll do a release in July, and then they do a release in October. And, unless something comes up in the October release, I only see myself buying 2 ornaments this year, which I've really slowed down on buying ornaments, which kind of stinks, because I was really into that for a minute. I've got a little display case, a display rack that's full of ornaments downstairs, which I really, people are like, holy smokes, when they see it. Let me get into other things that I collect real quick, and then I'll end it. But I collect Star Wars. I collect Back to the Future. I collect Bill and Ted. An oddball is I collect Texaco equipment, Texaco things like from the gas station, because both my grandfathers and my uncle worked for Texaco, so it's kind of a family thing for me. So I love collecting the signs. I've got a couple of porcelain signs that are on my back deck, and just some oddball stuff. I'll give you they were doing trucks, or little tin trucks, and I started collecting those. Then you realize how many they really are, so you stop really fast. So if I'm at a flea market and I can find like a pin, or I found a bathroom key for Texaco, so I bought that. I thought that was kind of cool. Oddball stuff like that, small stuff, because right now it's really, I don't have a whole lot of room, so I got to buy small stuff. I collect art. Like I said before, I'm really into Christian Wagner art, and I've been really fortunate to have a dozen pieces of his throughout my house. Just different artists through the time. What I always, I'll go to an artist alley at an event, and you always start looking, and then the guy was like, well, if you're going to buy 2, you might as well buy 3 or 4, because at that point you start getting free stuff, and then it's like, fine, I'll just end up buying 5 or 6 of your pieces. Because you'll buy 1 and it's 20, or you do 2 for 50 or 3 for 50. So at that point you're like, oh, I'll buy 3 or 4 for 50. They end up throwing stuff in. So at that point you're buying stuff just because it's girl math, which my wife loves girl math. She loves me when I talk, like when I start making math jokes, because that's how she makes her living. She is a loan officer, so she's always mathing all the time. I also play in a band. I play bass. I've been playing music since I've been 15. The band I'm in right now is called Thrum. We're sort of a doom metal band out of Atlanta. I call it Atlanta rock, because it's like every band I've played with, that's the kind of stuff we play. It's just a little different. So, you guys can look us up on Spotify if you want. I've been playing bass for 30 years. Finally, after fighting it for years, I bought a Fender jazz bass, an American Fender jazz bass, and I was like, why'd I fight it for so long? Because you get it, and you're like, this is what I've been looking for. As far as if I had to influences, Billy Gald from Faith No More, and there's a lesser known guy named Monty Colvin out of a band, Galactic Cowboys, out of Texas. Both those guys are my biggest influence. I've been chasing Billy's sound for like 30 years, and it's just something about it. You just can't get it right. And I've been close a couple of times, and then you change gear, and you never get there. But, if you guys care, I just bought an orange Tiny Terror bass head, and I think that's sort of, you get less is more type situation, because I was playing a dark class, and it had like 30 buttons on it to adjust everything, whereas this Tiny Terror has got 3 buttons. It's got a bass, a mid, and a treble. And you can get anything you want out of 3 knobs, which makes it a lot easier. And your brain thinks it's so much easier dealing with that versus 20 buttons. So that's where I'm at. Music gear, I got an Ampeg 410 that I played through, and that's it. I got a couple, like I said, I got the Gibson Jazz American, and I got a Mexican Jazz as a backup, just in case, because I always bring 2 basses with me, because I never know when I'm going to break a string, and there's nothing worse. I've been at a show where you have the big crescendo to start the show, and you hit the E string, and your string breaks, and you're like, you got to take 30 minutes or 10 minutes out the show to change a bass string and hunt one down. So it's a lot easier to just grab another bass and keep going, because it's easier that way. So that's where I'm at. That's me. I hope it was a good, I'm right at 30 minutes, so I hope it was a good 30 minutes for you guys. Hope you learned some stuff. I hope I didn't ramble too bad. I probably did, because like I said, I don't do a script, and I just kind of talked. So thanks for listening. Give us a like and a 5-star review. Thanks to Fonzo for the logo, and Levi for the music. This is the way.